Hi, my name is Brittany Dennis. I am a physical therapist and restorative exercise specialist. I'm here to help you take control of your health and bring a growth mindset to aging. And today I'd like to talk about osteoporosis. So if you have either already been diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia, or you're concerned about getting it in the future, then this is a great video for you. And really, all of us should be concerned about the density of our bones, whether or not we think we're near an age that we should be concerned about osteoporosis. And I'm going to give kind of an overview of how our bones regenerate themselves and some simple steps that you can take if you are concerned about osteoporosis to help facilitate healthy bones. Now, if you've already been diagnosed with osteoporosis, just know it's never too late to get started with building better bone density. And it's also never too early to start to think about these things, as I just mentioned. So the key is to expose your body to the right movement to allow you to build some bone density. And we need to talk a little bit about how bone cells work and how our bones kind of reinforce their density. So osteoporosis is called a disease of the bone, but it doesn't affect all of your bones equally. It tends to affect certain areas of your body. So places like the head of the femur and the hip is one of the most common sites of osteoporosis, and we all know somebody who's probably fallen and had a hip fracture before, and usually that's the culprit, is a loss of bone density in the hip. It also tends to be very common in the wrists and the ribs, especially as we age. So just knowing that osteoporosis does not affect all of your bones equally gives us a lot of information. So if you've been diagnosed with osteoporosis or been told that maybe you have osteopenia and they're seeing some thinning of your bone density, it can give you a lot of clues as to how you're moving depending on the sites of where your bone density has gotten a little bit thin. So the great news with that is there are a lot of steps that you can take to help rebuild that bone density. Now, your bone cells are just like any other cells in your body. So the cells in our body have a turnover. So we're constantly experiencing cell death. Our body clears those cells and regenerates new ones. Things like the skin tend to turn over pretty quickly. The inner lining of your intestine actually only takes about 3 days for those cells to turn over. Your bone tends to take about 10 years to completely turn over. So it's a pretty slow process, but it is definitely helpful if you start today, because by exposing yourself to certain forces and movements, you can encourage your bones to grow and reproduce some new cells. So a lack of movement tends to not stimulate bone growth. So if we aren't moving, we're not really giving our bones the signal that they need to turn over and make new cells. So we're experiencing cell death in the bone, but we're not experiencing cell growth. And that's what we want to facilitate, is to improve the growth of new bone cells. And bone cells respond to stress. So the whole purpose of movement or exercise is to actually expose your body to small amounts of stress in order to help it adapt and make it stronger. And bone cells respond to stress. You're going to produce a lot more bone cells the more stress you put on the bone, to a certain limit. So we need that to be small, controlled stress. If the stress gets to be too much, that's when we experience a fracture. So things that create positive stress in the bone are things like going for a walk, because you are getting both the stimulating effect of your heel hitting the ground, but the other thing that also stimulates bone cell to grow is that your muscles are attached to your bones. So they have different attachment points, and when that muscle pulls or shortens while you're walking or doing any kind of strengthening activity, it pulls a little bit on the bone and gives it a signal to reinforce in the area that it's attached. So it tells the bone, hey, grow some more cells here. The more load you put on the muscle, the more you're going to stimulate bone growth. So that's really important. to know is that movement is going to help you build some bone density. And again, walking is a fantastic example because you're doing a weight-bearing activity. So you're standing up and you're putting weight through your legs. That's another way to stimulate bone growth. And walking over ground, that little bit of jarring effect also helps stimulate bone growth. And then the muscles themselves propelling you forward give a signal to your bone to stimulate more growth. So again, it could be very simple to get your bone cells to kind of reproduce and reinforce in certain areas. But the key is that you need to be in a certain alignment in order to be weight bearing to build bone density. So for example, if you want to hop on a bike to build bone density, now you've actually taken the weight bearing out of your hips because your trunk is not in alignment over your legs. So if you're really concerned about building hip bone density, just going for a walk outside is going to be one of the best things you can do. So that gets your trunk vertical over your legs to give your hips the signals that they need to build some bone density. And same with wrist. That's why wrist osteoporosis is so common. It's because we don't tend to weight bear through our upper body anymore. So there's a few different ways you can do that. Getting on the ground into quadruped position and doing some rhomboid push-ups is a perfect way to kind of reinforce the bone in the wrists. And deep breathing is a really great way to help out with your ribs, because the reason that osteoporosis is so common in the ribs, it's because we aren't taking big deep breaths anymore. We aren't actually using our muscles that are in between our ribs to help facilitate bone growth in the ribs. So that's why rib fractures tend to be so common with falls in older adults. So again, really simple fix, just start deep breathing. If you have osteoporosis, you're gonna need a well-rounded approach to treat it. So movement is a really important component of that, and I find it's also the most overlooked component. And of course, people have probably addressed things like nutrition, other lifestyle factors, and even medications, but just know that movement is going to be one of the best ways you can facilitate new bone growth. So thanks for joining me for this one. I hope this was helpful for you in answering some questions about osteoporosis. If you want to know more about using body alignment to help facilitate bone growth or improve your balance and prevent falls, head on over to the website advancedbalance.org and sign up for our emails so you can get more information. Thank you.